Hi, I'm Christopher Nader, and this is another glimpse of God. This one's called Uncle Fred's Lexus, and here's the story. A couple of years ago, I was asked by Uncle Fred if I'd step in and help him get his end-of-life affairs in order. At that point, Fred was in his early 90s and beginning to really suffer from two conditions: bladder cancer and, as his PCP described it, too many birthdays. Fred needed somebody to get his will updated, keep an eye on his finances, and drive him around to doctor appointments. God had already blessed me with a job which allowed me a very flexible schedule, so I was available to help Fred. After a month, he made me the official executor of his estate. Now, I'm an avowed evangelical Christian, and Fred was a lifelong avowed atheist. So I naturally assumed God had arranged things so I could share the gospel of Jesus Christ with Uncle Fred before it was too late. And that happened, in fact, several times. But there was another reason God had in mind, which I'll tell you about in a moment. I'm sorry to report that Uncle Fred remained steadfast in his rejection of the gospel of Christ to the day he died. But I'm getting ahead of the story. About a month before he passed, Uncle Fred announced he was done with driving and asked if I'd like to have his car, which was a well-maintained 14-year-old Lexus. I answered, "Sure, Fred, I'll get it sold for you and put the proceeds into your estate." Uncle Fred said, "No, if you want it, I want you to have it. Keep it, drive it." I told him I'd be delighted. I chauffeured Fred around in the Lexus to various errands and appointments, and then when Uncle Fred passed, the title to the Lexus passed to me. Now, if that's all there was to the story, it would go down as pretty secular. Christian guy helps family member, is given the decedent's car as a thank you. But here's why it's a real glimpse of God. Check this out. For more than a decade before Uncle Fred died, I'd used the Lexus car name, and only the Lexus car name, in Bible teachings about how the Lord always gives us what we need, and also sometimes what we want. My time-tested example was always, "You see, guys, I've always wanted to drive a Lexus, but apparently the Lord thinks my ancient Chevy Suburban with 200,000 miles on it is the right vehicle for me because he keeps the Suburban running year after year. But just to make sure, I check my garage every morning to see if by some chance the Lord has decided to put a Lexus in there after all. And every morning, sure enough, no Lexus in the garage." Now, if Uncle Fred had given me a Ford or a Toyota, there wouldn't have been much God in it. But Fred gave me a Lexus, and that turned it into a huge God story, which I've already told and retold scores of times. What it says to me is that the Lord was having me use the example of a Lexus in my garage for years, so God could demonstrate, eventually, His power to provide. If God had wanted me to have a Lexus, He could have provided it at any time in any number of ways. But by delaying His provision until I'd mentioned that specific car brand many, many times in explaining how God works, the Lord magnified the God part of the story and made it teachable for years to come. Sounds like why Jesus intentionally delayed coming to the aid of His dying friend Lazarus in John 11, doesn't it? Sometimes God intentionally uses delays to intensify His glory in our lives. What a glimpse of God. Uncle Fred's Lexus is still parked in our garage every night. Thanks for watching.